time is not on the birds' side. The jungle is fast disappearing, and the bare pinnacles are spreading. Must it be the end of the day for Christmas Island? If you really had the choice, which would you prefer, a few more acres of phosphate or the survival of a unique bird? And which would win the real booby prize?
This is the world's largest coral atoll, a remote island in the Pacific Ocean, just 2 degrees north of the equator. It's marked by more than 100 sheets of water, some of them lakes over 3 kilometers across. The average height of the land above sea level is only about 2.5 meters. It has had several names, among them Abacaroro, the faraway island. Now it is known simply as Christmas Island. This is Christmas Island, an equally remote place in the Indian Ocean. Of a largely submerged volcano, it rises out of the sea to a height of 360 meters. Although surrounded by a submerged coral reef, close to the coast, the seabed is over 1.5 kilometers deep. With access available only to a selected few, these 2 specks in the ocean, separated by almost 10,000 kilometers, at first sight seem to have little in common but a name. James Cook, during one of his 18th century voyages of discovery, gave this place in the Pacific its name. He was unimpressed by what he saw and considered that anyone unfortunate enough to be stranded here would surely die. Water has always been the problem. The lagoons contain 3 times as much salt as seawater, and there's often no rain for months. Men first came to this island to exploit it. Most have been disappointed, and many who insisted on getting too close were thwarted. But in the end, some have come to stay. About 1,000 Gilbertese people now call this place home, and manage to eke out an existence by demanding less than those of different creeds who came before them. They have brought with them their expertise, their customs, and their traditions. Been birds on Christmas Island. These frigate birds are sometimes called man-o'-war birds because of their habit of harassing other birds in flight and stealing their food. The frigate bird is on the national emblem of the Gilbert Islands, now known as Kiribati, and as such is treated with affection by many Gilbertese. This affinity with bird life has not always been so. Since the first men came to Christmas Island, birds have often had a hard time. In the early days, many people owned firearms. Birds were shot for food and for sport. Today, some old men know the names of birds which they've never seen, but were told about by their parents. This must mean that many bird species have disappeared, particularly during the early decades of this century. Perhaps the largest influence on the birds was the nuclear era. In the late 1950s and early 60s, more than 30 hydrogen bombs were exploded close to Christmas Island. Although radioactivity levels were very low, the birds couldn't be protected from the flash, and millions of them were blinded. Unable to see, to find food, they and their offspring starved to death. Some colonies were virtually exterminated. Today, Christmas Island is a wildlife sanctuary, and many of the birds are so unafraid of humans that they may be approached and observed at close quarters. Birds are what first attracted men to this island. Seabird excrement, guano, is a valuable fertilizer, and it was thought to be here for the taking, but unaccountably it wasn't. Christmas Island is used by many birds as a breeding place, a stopover, or a staging point. Noddies are found throughout the tropics. Their homing ability is amazing. Some breeding birds were once taken almost 2,000 kilometers away and released. Within 5 days, they'd return to their nests. The nests are usually built of seaweed and leaves in the ground, sometimes interwoven with sticks or coral and pressed into a shrub, like that of this black noddy and her chick. Brown noddies are resident as well as black. Wedge-tailed shearwaters build their nest in shallow tunnels or scrapes under bushes, or in shallow burrows. Individual nest sites are vigorously defended, and as a scare tactic, they often discharge oil from the mouth. This is the Christmas Island shearwater. Boobies got their name from seafarers who regarded them as dimwits or boobies. In southern seas they're called gannets. Some Australian gannets once out-boobied all others. When they flew so close to a naturalist, he was able to catch 5 of them by hand before the others had the good sense to fly out of his reach. The red-footed booby is the smallest of the species, but unlike other boobies, it builds its crude stick nest off the ground in shrubs or trees. It usually lays 2 eggs about 6 days apart. Although both hatch, usually only the first chick survives. As it's bigger by the time the second one hatches, it grabs all or most of the food. It has the largest eyes of any of the boobies, and this is probably a contributing factor to its being more nocturnal in its habits. tropic bird was once persecuted for its long tail streamers. It breeds throughout the year in large, sometimes overcrowded colonies, and adults in search of sites sometimes kill young birds that have recently hatched. One egg is laid on the ground, often under shrubs or a rock overhang. The phoenix petrel is a close relative of the shearwater. It feeds mainly on squid, and sometimes also on fish, crustaceans and insects. It's known locally as ruru. Frigate birds breed in huge island colonies, building crude platforms of sticks and straw in low bushes. The single young must be guarded at all times, as unprotected nests are often torn apart by other adults in search of nesting materials, and nestlings are ruthlessly savaged by cannibalistic neighbours. Adult male frigate birds have an inflatable throat pouch, sometimes as large as a man's head, which they inflate frequently during courtship. This is a female. Both sexes take part in making the nest, in incubation, and in brooding the young. Only one egg is laid. The young fledge in 4 to 5 months, but remain dependent on their parents for up to a year. This shivering effect is for cooling. Chicks often prostrate themselves to beg for food from their parents. They stretch out their wings and make petulant calls, wagging their heads up and down behind lowered shoulders. On some islands, young frigate birds are hand-reared and, after fledging, return to perches to be hand-fed. Such tame birds have been used in the South Pacific to carry messages between islands. These Gilbertese school children on the island are being taught to recognize a natural heritage and to treasure it. It will probably be up to them in their turn to educate future visitors to treasure it too. Hopefully, they will take more care than their predecessors. Disliked this place. Others have learned to love it and to live with a Bakaroro, a faraway island. Christmas Island in the Indian Ocean is Australian territory. Less than 100 years ago,